Let's go over a CRUD project again. Remember, CRUD stands for Create, Retrieve, Update, and Delete. Here, we are going to track bill payments using CRUD. As you can see up here, I have a header, and I'm using my H1 tag size here. And down here, I've got a footer, and I'm using the H3 size down there. To the left, I've got a section that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 field sets. In the first field set, we've got select with options. And the next 3 field sets, we have areas to type text into, and all of them have labels. There's a label that says bill, a label that says amount, a label that says paid, a label that says detail. In the last field set, we've got 2 buttons. We use a break tag so that we can see the buttons a little bit lower so that it's not starting at the top of this field set. Then over here to the right, we have another section, and we let JavaScript create this header that we have here. The header with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 table headers: bill, amount, pay, detail, and action. When we hit Pay Bill button, we're going to call a JavaScript function that takes whatever information is on the left and it spits it out on the right, including 2 new buttons, an edit and a delete. As you can see, in this select, it says rent first, but the output underneath isn't exactly the same. So I'll show you in code how you can make them the same if you want, or how you can make them output differently than what you see in the options. The edit button works by taking whatever information is in this row and it populates it to the left where you can change some things. So here we didn't have an amount. You can put an amount, you can put a date, paid, and you can enter details if you want. You don't have to, but you can if you want. Then when you click the update button, you have changed everything in the row to whatever you want. And after you click update, the face on this turns into pay bill again. If you click edit again, and then you come over here and you go, well, no, wait, it says update, but I changed my mind. I don't want to update that. I want to do something new. Then you can click the clear button below, and all of these go to the default without changing anything in this row. So let's say now you want to do a different bill, and you want to put in whatever you want to put in. And maybe you don't have any details for this. You don't have to put any details. You can leave it blank. Again, if you want to edit it to make changes, and maybe you do want to add details, or you want to change the amount to something different, whatever you want to do. The delete button works by deleting the entire row. So let's look at the code. If I go to my desktop, you see my folder says More CRUD Practice, and that's where this project is. So if I go into this folder, I have one HTML file. It's called index.html. That's my web page. Inside the folder called Box, I have action.js, which is the external JavaScript code, and style.css, which is the external cascading style sheet. And I've got a couple of, well, a few images actually. I've got clover.bmp that I'm using as an image icon, and clovers.jpg, which is a background. I also have heart.bmp, where I can change my image icon, and hearts.jpg, so I can change my background. So with that being said, let me right click on my action, right click on my style, edit with Notepad++. So I have index.html, style.css, and action.js. In my index.html, everything is going to be nested inside of HTML tags, and little by little I'll open them up. My style.css, I have all kinds of elements. My body's being styled, my H1 and H3 tags have a style, label, field set, input and select, select by itself, button by itself, table by itself, table, table header, and table data cell share a style. T-head has its own style, TH has its own style, TD and TH share a style. A TH with an ID of bill has a style, a TH with an ID of detail has a style. Class head and class foot share styles. Class foot has its own style, class container has its own style, class left bar and class right bar share styles. Then class left bar has its own style, with right bar having also its own style. And finally, we have an ID of table rows with a style, ID submit and ID edit share styles, and ID clear and ID delete share styles. So we have IDs, classes, and tags. All of those will be styled, and we'll look at those shortly. In the action.js JavaScript, we have two global variables, one called selected index, one called bills array, and 6 functions. Function init, function pay bill. Init and pay bill have no parameters in the parentheses. Function prepare table cell has 5 parameters, index, bill, amount, date paid, and details. Function delete table row has 1 parameter called index. Function clear it has no parameters in the parenthesis. And finally, function edit row has 1 parameter called index. And we'll look at all of those functions last when we look at action.js. We will look at all that last. Let's first look at our web page. And just a reminder, this is what the web page looks like. Let's open up our HTML tags. You have a head and you have a body. Let's open up our head. Inside of the opening and closing head tag, we have the following: title, a link to a shortcut icon, which in this case is pointing to clover.bmp. We have a link pointing to our external style sheet, which is called style.css. We have a meta char set to UTF-8. We have meta with name set to viewport and content set to width, device width, initial scale 1.0. And then we also point to our external JavaScript, which is called action.js. That's all that we have in our head. Let's close our head. Let's open up our body tags. In our body, our opening body tag has an onload event set to the init function, so it's calling the init function. Inside of the body tags, we have a div with a class called container. Let's open up that. So here's our opening div and closing div tag. Inside of the container div, we have a header with a class head, an aside with class left bar, another aside with class right bar, and a footer, which the footer is already open, a footer with a class of foot. All right, let's look at the first header. Inside the opening closing header with a class of head, we have an h1 tag that says track bill payments with CRUD. And to remind you, that's this part. Let's close the header and let's look at this aside. This aside goes from line 20 to 63. Aside with the class of left bar. If we go back to the page, it's all this stuff on the left. It has all these field sets. In this field set, we've got a label and a select. In this field set, we have a label with a text area. In the third field set, we have a label paid with a place to type in the date paid. The next field set, we have a label of details, which goes to this text area where we enter the details. And in the last field set, we have 2 buttons. We have a break tag and then the pay bill button and the clear button, which when you click the pay bill button, it's going to call a function. When you click the clear button, it's going to call a function. So let's look at those things. Here's our first field set. In the aside with the class of left bar, label for bill, and label tag. Opening select tag on line 25 down to line 39. This is our drop-down list. It's called a select. We gave it an ID of bill. The first option, the value is set to rent first, and then what you actually see in the drop-down is this, in between the opening and closing option tags. Rent equals first is what you see and what you click on, but the output, when you select it and do something with it, will say rent first. So if I remind you, rent equals first, that is this part. And then when we actually click on it and do something with it, rent first is this part, value equals rent first. So we do these options over and over again, and you can change your options to whatever you want the values to be and whatever you want to be seen on the drop-down list. After you finish that, you close your select tag and you close your field set. There's that field set. Let's look at the next field set. There's the label and there's the input. Label for amount with the word label, and input type equals text, placeholder equals enter amount, ID equals amount. The placeholder is what you see inside the text area that lets you know what to type. The ID is what the JavaScript is going to use to manipulate that particular piece of data. So we're going to do the same thing for the next labels, for the next field sets. We're going to have a label and we're going to have an input. In the next field set, we're going to have a label and we're going to have an input. Lastly, the last field set, we have a break tag, a button, and a button. The first button has an ID of submit. On click event calls pay bill function. The face of the button says pay bill. The next button has an ID set to clear, and on click event, which we'll call the clear it function, the face of the button says clear and the ending button tag. So that's all the field sets, and here's the ending aside. So we've looked at the whole left-hand side of the page here. Now let's look at the right-hand side. Aside with the class of right bar. Here we've got a table, opening and closing table tags. JavaScript is going to populate what is inside of the t-head tag that has the ID of head and the t-body tag that has an ID of table rows. So JavaScript is going to deal with both of these elements. Then you have your closing table tag and your closing aside tag. That takes us down to the footer that has the class of foot. Inside of that, we just have an H3, a header with a size of 3, and it just says my name. It uses the code, the and symbol, the word copy, and then the semicolon, which gives us the copyright symbol, and this year, which is 2018, and closing H3 tag. So that's all there is to the footer. The ending div tag ends this whole container that we looked at, the ending body tag, and the ending HTML. And that's everything that you need to make this index page. Now let's look at the styles. For the body, inside of the curly braces you have margin, padding, font family, overflow, font size, background image, and background repeat. All of those are set. Currently I have my background image set to the URL clovers.jpg. That gives me the clovers in the background here. And background repeat, no repeat means that it's basically just gonna stretch everything in my Clover background. Now, what was the other possibility that I had? Hearts.jpg. Let's change that to, instead of clovers.jpg, let's change it to hearts.jpg so you can see what that looks like. Ah, that looks awful. It did not stretch. My Clover's background did, but this one didn't. So, background repeat, no repeat. Let's call this one background repeat repeat and see what happens. There, much better. And because this pattern is it's flowing, the repeat is flowing nicely, you don't have a problem. But if you saw lines and broken areas and it didn't look nice by repeating, you'd have to change your background to something that works nicer when it is repeating. Let's see if I went back to Clovers with the background repeat repeat, what it would do out of curiosity. Oh, it looks the same to me. I think it's the same. I'm not sure. But anyway, this works good for both. Background repeat, repeat worked good for both. Let me go back to the hearts. Because I would like to show you, instead of using this clover icon that I created in Paint, this one I created in Paint, I'm going to see what the heart.bmp looks like. It's 100 by 100. I resized it. I got it from the internet, but then I resized it in Paint. Let's see what this looks like as our icon, our image icon. So for that, I have to go back to the index.html and go in the head. Right here, link rel equals shortcut icon. Let's point to heart.bmp instead of clover. So see, you can easily change the look of your web page just by changing the background image and your image icon. Okay, back to the code. I don't need to look at this anymore. Back to my style. That's what the body has for a style. The H1 and H3 have these styles: color, text align, margin, and padding. The label just has display block. Field set has a margin, a background color set. Because I am using red here, you might want your field sets to have a red background instead of tan. So you could very simply change that here if you want. Next we have the input and the select. The input and the select, this is the select, and this is the input. So they're sharing a width, a border radius, and a padding. Let's see what happens if we give it a color. If it changes the font color. And it did. See, now all the font color inside of both the select with options and inside the text areas, they're also red. You may or may not like that. The select by itself has a certain background color. That's this. That's this. You might want to change that. It looks kind of like beige. You might want to change that to pink in this case. Let's see what that does. See, now only the select has a pink background. If you wanted the input to have a different color background, you could do that as well. The button has a font size and a width. You can change that accordingly. The table has a font size, a border collapse, and a margin set. Table header and table data cell all share these, border padding and margins. The T-head tag has the top margin left positioned and Z-index. All of those are set. There's TH, TD and TH. TH with an ID of bill has a minimum width set. TH with an ID of detail also has a minimum width set. We've got a bunch of classes here. The head and the foot class share these. The foot class by itself has this setting. The container has the following settings. And the class left bar and right bar share these settings. The class left bar by itself has this set of unique settings, and right bar has these unique settings. Finally, we have some IDs. The element with the ID of table rows has the color and the position set as shown. The elements that have submit and edit IDs have the following shared styles. And then finally, the clear and delete IDs share background color, color, border, font size. And if you don't want to see the clear and delete buttons, you could either use display none or visibility hidden, depending on how you want your page to output. They are Z'd out here, which means they're not executing, but I left it here for future reference. So that's everything in the style.css. Let's check out the action. Global variables in the action.js JavaScript file. First we have selected index set to -1, and then we have we create an array called bills array. Let's look at the function init. The first statement, document.getElementById parentheses and quotes head.enterHTML equals, and in single quotes we have an opening tr tag, an opening th tag with an ID set to bill. Then in between the opening and closing table header we have the word bill, and then the closing table header tag. Then we have another table header right here with the word amount. The next table header is here with the word paid. After that we have this table header with an ID set to detail and the word detail. And finally we have a final table header with the word action. And lastly we have our closing table row tag. All of that gives us this: bill, amount, pay, detail, and action. Next statement is document.getElementById parentheses and quotes table rows .enterHTML equals a break tag. Then we have an if condition. If local storage.billsRecord, well, if that is true, we're going to do what's inside of these curly braces right here. Bills array equals json.parse parentheses local storage.billsRecord. And then we have a for loop for var I equals 0, I less than bills array.length I plus plus. Inside of the for loop, which goes from here to here, we call the prepare table cell function, and we put in its parentheses 5 arguments to match the prepare table cells 5 parameters. And the arguments are I, comma, bills array index I.bill, comma, bills array index I.amount, comma, bills array index I.date paid, comma, and finally bills array index I.details. Those are all the arguments that we are using inside the prepare table cell function. There's the ending for block, the ending if block, and the ending init function. Alright, so with that being said, let's close up the init function, and that is what is run when the page loads, index.html loads. Let's look at function payBill, which is what is called when we click the payBill function. Alright, so there's the beginning of the function. The first line is var bill equals document.getElementById parentheses and quotes bill.value. Then var amount equals document.getElementById parentheses and quotes amount.value. And then this is just a comment because I did not create this variable properly. So here's my note to myself in case I do another mistake like this. This line below was var due instead of var date paid, which caused an error in my code earlier. Searching for the number of times an element's name showed up in all code and comparing date paid's hits with the amounts and details hits helped me find my error. Since I was dealing with a name of a bill, an amount, a paid, a detail, I needed to make sure that each one of those elements were used about the same number of times or the same number of times in my code. And when I found something that wasn't of the same number of hits, then I figured it out. This was var due equals document.getElementById date paid value instead of var date paid. So by fixing that, I fixed my problem. The next statement is var details equals document.getElementById, parentheses, quotes, details.value. And then here's an object. We're creating an object. Var bill obj, which is short for bill object, equals, and in our curly braces we have bill colon bill, comma, amount colon amount, comma, date paid colon date paid, comma, and details colon details. Close in curly brace and end it with a semicolon. So there's the end of that object. This whole thing is an object. All right, here's a note that says if else to decide if his existing item gets updated or a new item gets inserted. So for an insert, we have this if condition. If selected index triple equals -1, if that's true, then we're going to do an insert, and this is how we do the insert. Bills array.push, parentheses, bill object. Now, if we're not doing an insert, we're doing an update, then we use this else, and we do this line of code, bills array.splice, parentheses, selected index, comma, 1, comma, bill object. And so here is the ending of the if block, and here is the ending of the else block. Then we have this line of code, local storage.billsRecord equals json.stringify, parentheses, bills array. Then we call the init function again, and we call the clearit function. And that's the end of the pay bill. So let's close pay bill. So we've looked at the init and we've looked at the pay bill. Let's look at the function called prepare table cell with all of those parameters inside. So our first opening line says function prepare table cell, and in parentheses we have the following parameters: index, bill, amount, date paid, and details. The next line of code is var table equals document.getElementById, parentheses, quotes, table rows. This is the part that I told you, if we go back to the index, when we go into the body, let's see, when we go into the right bar, right here, table rows, the ID of head and the ID of table rows, we already did the head, which created this part, but the part that creates all this below it is using the ID of table rows. So going back here, var table equals document.getElementById table rows, we're creating the table through JavaScript, this right here. The next line of code is var row equals table.insert row, followed by var bill cell equals row.insert cell 0 in parentheses, then var amount cell equals row.insert cell 1 in parentheses, var due cell equals row.insert cell with 2 in parentheses, var detail cell equals row.insert cell 3 in parentheses, and then var action cell equals row.insert cell with 4 in parentheses. So that's creating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's creating all of those cells. Bill cell.innerHTML equals bill, but we're doing more than that. We also want to colorize that. Bill cell.style.color equals lime, and bill cell.style.width equals 100 pixels. This ensures that everything that's going to go under the bill column will have a lime color, and it also ensures that the width of this will be 100 pixels. Next we have amount cell.innerHTML equals amount, followed by due cell.innerHTML equals date paid. Then we're going to deal with detail cell, and we're going to do 2 different things with that as well. Detail cell.innerHTML equals details, and also we want to make sure the width is a specific width. So detail cell.style.width equals 250 pixels, because we want our detail cell to have more room in case we type a lot of details in. We want this to be like the longest length, or actually width, of any of the other cells. So that's how that happens. Now action cell has, that's this part right here where we're going to create a couple of buttons inside of the cell. So this one is like a mouthful. Action cell.innerHTML equals, and in single quotes we have a button tag. The opening button tag has an ID of edit. It has an on-click event set to edit row, and then in its parentheses we have single quote plus index plus single quote, closing parentheses, and double quotes. So that's kind of a mouthful. And that's our opening button tag. All that is the opening button tag. We have the word edit that will show on the button. As you can see right here, it says edit. And then we have our closing button tag right here, followed by a break tag, so we go to the next line, and then we create our second button. This button has an ID set to delete, and it has an on-click event set to the delete table row function. And this is similar to the one above it, in which it finishes off with opening parenthesis quote plus index plus quote, closing parenthesis, and then finish it off with our double quote. In between that opening and closing button tag, we have the delete word on the face of the button, and then our closing button tag. And again, all of that mumbo jumbo is enclosed inside of single quotes. So that's quite a mouthful. And then we have our ending curly brace for the prepare table cell function. So now we finished that function. Let's close that one up. Alright, we have 3 more functions. Let's look at function delete table row with the single parameter called index. Let's open that up. This is nice and short. The first statement inside of this function is billsArray.splice parentheses index comma 1. The second statement inside of this function is local storage.billsRecord equals json.stringify in parentheses billsArray. And then finally you call the init function. So that's all you get for the delete table row. Very simple. Very short rather. Now let's look at the function called clearit. And that goes from line 104 to line 118. Selected index equals -1. Document.getElementById parentheses quotes bill.value equals rent first. This is the default value. When we click the clearit button and it calls the clearit function, we want in that select drop down, we want the value to always be defaulted to the first thing that we put in there, which had the value of rent first. If we go back to the index.html where we created that, in the left bar in the first field set, this is the value. You have to spell this exactly as it is here. Value equals rent first. If you don't say .value equals rent first and you just say rent, it's not going to be able to find it. And what happens is when you click, if you click clear, well, edit, update, clear. Wait, let me pick something else. Caddy repair, pay bill, edit, update, clear. Alright. I didn't save my changes. Clear. There. I didn't save my changes. When you hit clear, instead of this automatically defaulting to rent equals first, it can't find it, so it is empty. You may want that to be the default, because then when they go to do the next bill that they're going to select, it will always be empty instead of going to the first one. So that's really up to you how you want that to be, but if you want it to default to a specific selection, you have to make the value identical to a value that you gave it. So in this case, rent first. So let's save this. Go back and refresh. If I pay a bill, if I edit, if I clear it, if I go back to something different and clear it, when I hit clear, it goes back to rent equals first. It goes back to the first selection. Alright, again, that's your personal preference if you want to give it a default or if you want it to just be blank. All right, here's the next default. Document.getElementById, parentheses, quotes, amount.value equals empty string. Document.getElementById, parentheses, quotes, date paid.value equals empty string. Document.getElementById, details.value equals an empty string. And document.getElementById, parentheses, double quotes, submit.innerHTML equals pay bill. So that's this button right here, this button, pay bill. When you hit clear, so when you hit edit over here, it changes it to update. If you hit clear, it goes back to pay bill. So pay bill is the default value of this button if you want it to be, if you code it. If you code it as such. And that's the end of the clear it function. So let's close that up. Let's look at the very last function, function edit row with a single parameter of index. So let's open it up and let's see how long this one is. It's not too long. Selected index equals index of our bill object equals bill array, bills array, and straight brackets the word index. Document.getElementById, parentheses and double quotes, bill.value equals bill obj.bill. So this is the name of the bill object. We called it bill obj, so I'm going to just say bill object instead of bill obj. And we're going to do that over and over again. Document.getElementById, parentheses and double quotes, amount.value equals bill object.amount. Document.getElementById, parentheses double quotes, date paid.value equals bill object.datepaid. Document.getElementById, parentheses double quotes, details.value equals bill object.details. And finally, document.getElementById, parentheses double quotes, submit.innerHTML equals update. So when we're calling the edit row, depending on the index, every time we're going to edit a row, we want that button to now have a different face. This time we want the button to say update instead of having it say pay bill. Okay? This is the submit button being changed to say pay bill when you hit clear it. And when you hit edit row, you want that submit button to say update. Alright, so that finishes up the edit row index. We've went over all 6 of the functions in the outer action.javascript file. We've went over the style.css external style sheet, and we went over the index.html web page. I showed you how to change the background and the icon that shows up in the browser tab, and I showed you how each of these individual buttons work. I can delete a bunch of what I created with the delete button. It deletes the whole row. I hit the edit and I can make changes to any of the features that we want to save data for. Update, clear it if you need to clear it. These are the defaults. When you hit clear, you get all the defaults in these sections. If you mess something up, all you have to do is hit the edit button and you could make changes for whatever you messed up.